Today, we talk about cooking up tastier photos. This is Behind the Shot. Hi, welcome again to Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill, your host. It's so kind of you to join me. A couple things to let you know about before we bring our guest in today. First of all, the show notes for this show and every show you can find at behindtheshot.tv. You can also subscribe to this show wherever you get your favorite podcasts or in your favorite podcast app. And I would like to ask actually that you do take the time, if you're a podcast listener or watcher, to subscribe, because that's what affects the charts and that's what affects discoverability. So any subscriptions really help with that. And keep in mind, in your podcast app, if it supports video, I've got two feeds. You can subscribe to an audio-only version. Makes it a little bit tough. You'll want to head by the website to see the photo first. Or you can subscribe to a video version. Both of those, again, available wherever you get your favorite podcasts, if that service or application supports video. Also, the video is up on our YouTube channel for Behind the Shot, so you can always go subscribe there. If you subscribe on YouTube, please make sure you hit that bell. That way you are aware every time we post something new. And there's a number of things that are going up on YouTube that do not go in the normal podcast feed. As an example, we have a Flickr group for Behind the Shot. So if you're a Flickr member and you go join the group Behind the Shot, everybody's posting pictures up there and we're having a lot of fun. And I'll tell you about something else special coming up here in just a second. But also, if you're not a Flickr member, go join Flickr. It doesn't cost anything. There's a pro membership that you can pay for, gives you better advantages, or there is a free version of Flickr. And the free version of Flickr works just as well to join the Behind the Shot Flickr group and submit your photos to the group. Now, if you submit photos to the Behind the Shot group on Flickr, and if you tag them with BTS Critique, that enters them for a possible chance at being critiqued by Don Komarechka of Photo Geek Weekly podcast, which, by the way, if you don't watch, or I should say listen to Photo Geek Weekly, it's one of my favorite podcasts. Don and I are now doing critique shows. At the time of this recording, one of them is live. But by the time this airs, we'll probably have 2, maybe 3 critique episodes up on the YouTube channel. So again, go join Flickr, join the Behind the Shot group, submit your images, and tag them with BTS Critique. That's a Flickr tag, not a hashtag, and you'll be good to go. And that, my friends, brings us up to our guest today. I want to welcome Freddy Clark. Freddy, how are you?
I am well, Steve. Thank you for having me here.
It is good to see you and nice to meet you in person. And the way that we met is the way I meet so many people nowadays, right? I met you through Rick Salmon, our mutual friend.
Yep. Rick is the big conduit in the entire industry, I think.
He's like the Kevin Bacon of photography. It's like 6 degrees of Rick Salmon.
Exactly.
Because it seems like Rick knows literally everybody. And Rick and you are going to be doing a workshop to Mount Rainier coming up next fall, October, as I recall, of 2020.
That's correct. Yep.
And I may be going on that, it looks like, with my wife, because she's going to be retired. So we're going to head out and have some fun. And
Excellent.
When we were talking about that with Rick, he said, you need to meet Freddy. And meeting you was interesting for so many reasons. You brought up, as we were talking back and forth, how close our paths are.
Yes, because I'd heard you on a couple podcasts, probably Don's, I think, too. And I was like, wow, this guy's got radio background. He's got IT background, photography. It was like, I'm the East Coast version of you, apparently.
Yeah. Well, you have to have one for each coast.
Exactly.
You're New Jersey based, right?
Yes, I am. About an hour outside of New York.
And what you photograph is something, I most of my guests photograph something not only I don't photograph, but I know that I can't, and I don't even think of trying a lot of the times, because it's just, my mind doesn't see like that. I take what I learned from landscape photographers and portrait photographers and travel photographers and documentary, and I apply all of that to my music photography, because you can gather from everything, right?
Yep.
But you actually photograph something that I've always been interested to try at some point. You are a beverage and food photographer. So I've got such questions. So let's dive into you a little bit.
Okay, sounds good.
Photographer.
Yes.
You're an educator. You've done stuff for Canon and Visions workshops.
That's correct, yes.
And your path is interesting. So explain to people how your path is similar to mine.
Okay, so out of college, in school, photography was not a passion of mine. When I was in college, college radio station, wanted to be a rock and roll DJ. That's all I wanted to do. And got out of school, did it for about a decade, worked on the East Coast, started with a small station in the Pocono Mountains, worked my way into WDHA in Morristown, New Jersey, and then ended up at WRAT in Monmouth, Ocean County, right down the Jersey Shore here. And, that was the passion. That was the love. As I was working more and more, got married, had a child, and I don't have to tell you, Steve, I'm sure that radio is not the path to riches.
No, it is. People say to me, "Oh, I really want to get in radio. What do I need to do?" And my answer to them usually is, first decide why you're getting in radio.
Exactly.
Because if you're getting in radio because you truly just have to be on the radio and you love music or talk radio or whatever, that's great. Follow your passion. If you're getting into radio because you want to make money, go work at McDonald's. You'll make more.
Exactly. So then ultimately I became a photographer, which is the same scenario anyway, right? So, but anyway, so working in radio.
That's actually a good point. That's, you know what? You might want to rethink your life choices.
Right, yeah. Well, you know what? I go for what I love, not like you said, not for making the money.
Yeah.
Was working. I was working my tail off. I was production director during the day and night jock at the Rat. Did that for 2 years, and in all honesty, started to lose the passion for it. Started to see friends of mine, their lives going in a trajectory, and realized that my passion for radio was not exactly enough to drive me further anymore. So I did, actually, because of radio, it was at the time when we were going from analog to digital. And I started, basically the general manager walked into my production room one day and said, "Here's a digital audio workstation." It was in the boxes, and said, "Figure it out," and walked out. So I'm looking at this, pulled the manual out, started reading how to, the engineer came in to do the interface with the board, but he didn't know what to do with it. So I had to figure it out. So the next step for me professionally was then going into IT. I basically taught myself, and it was at the period of time when you could teach yourself how to do it.
Right.
And early on, so this would have been in the late 90s, started teaching myself, got a job at a place that is very ironic given where I am today. Got a job doing IT for a place called the Image Bank in Manhattan. And photography was not a thing I was really into yet, but was doing IT for them. And, it's the stock image photography company. And I was surrounded by imagery. And I started to figure out what I liked about photography. Images I liked, images that didn't resonate with me. But it was just from purely a fan perspective, a consumer perspective, right?
Right.
So then the big thing to get me into photography was had a daughter. And realized I didn't have a camera, went out and bought a camera, didn't know basically which end of the thing to point, right? And began to self-teach myself
that literally is my path, right? I started in radio very, very young. I've been in radio since 1979 and still am, right? Went into tech, got my Microsoft certified systems engineer, became an IT consultant, which I actually still do.
3, 5, or 4?
351.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
NT 351.
Okay.
And I still do that. I'm an independent IT consultant. And then I had a child, and that brought me into photography. But your photography path was not always beverage and food. You did portraits, you did landscapes, you did weddings, and ended up now as a food and beverage photographer where you've got photos in a cookbook that, by the way, people can buy on Amazon. I'll have a link to the book in the show notes at behindtheshot.tv. A Meal for All Seasons, Anton's at the Swan. Your photos are in that book.
That's
correct. And again, head by the website, behindtheshot.tv. You can find a link to the book. You can find all of Freddy's links. And you can also see a small gallery of Freddy's work. So that brings me to the questions that I have based on what you photograph that is just so uniquely different than me. Okay. If somebody is an aspiring, and I know a number of people who shoot food that do it really, really well. And they've each mentioned different kinds of answers to this. So I'm curious, from the helicopter view, right?
Mm-hmm.
An aspiring food and beverage photographer, what is the thing or things they need to have in their bag?
It's really no different than any other photographer. Okay. It's just all of the things I learned from doing other things were applicable to food and beverage. So the first thing, of course, is composition, right? All the rules of composition still apply. You know, how to actually compose a picture, rule of thirds, everything is the same. Lighting is the same as a good portrait photographer. So
is it really though? Because you have different kinds of specular highlights. I mean, I don't want to say different, a specular highlight, right. But for you, I might worry about your glasses. But on a food, that's the strangest sentence I've ever said. On a food, that's like somebody saying, "Go look at the Google." Right. But with food or beverages, the specular highlights can just be insanely out of control.
Beverage is harder. I will grant you that. Controlling light for glassware can be daunting. And that is where I really began to dig into lighting, to be in all honesty. Food, give you a perfect example. The deadly on-camera flash coming down will make a dish look completely flat, take away any nooks and crannies, take away any glisten. You want to be coming from the back or the side. You want to get that raking light. You want to create the contrast as it cuts across, let's say a steak, right? Coming across the top of that steak, you're going to get that glisten if you're at the right angle. Coming across a nice piece of bread, you're going to get the nooks and crannies of the bread as you're coming across the angle. So it's no different than,
I'm getting hungry.
Contrast is created by when you bring light and dark together. So when you light it correctly, you're going to see a nook, the dimples in a piece of bread. You're going to see that as the dark side of it is being, and you got the light hitting from the front, the dark hitting from the side. You're going to create that texture.
Like Rick says, light illuminates, shadows define. I mean, that's it. But
exactly.
You mentioned catching the glistening. Now, I do know food photographers who either spray water or spray glycerin on the food to have, because sometimes you've got food under hot lights and it's sitting there for a while. So I want to get into two quick questions here. And that is one, how do you keep food glistening? Or what artificial means do you use? And two, if somebody is aspiring to start in this, can they start with, a standard speed light diffused through a sheet, if that's all they've got, or an umbrella? Or do you need a softbox where you have more feather control?
You don't need a softbox, no. In fact, lately, my lighting method has been very simple. It's been one light into actually a V-flat, a large white V-flat, bouncing back then across the food to mimic window light. Right now, window light is extremely in vogue with food photography.
Interesting. It'll be a little bounce.
It'll be a little more, a little harsher, a little brighter. So I'll tell people all the time, if you've got good window light, definitely go with that for food. But of course you can't always have that. And I used to use a speed light in a softbox. I've used Ellen Chromes. I've used Paul Buffs in different modifiers. But really for food now, it's my Paul Buff bouncing into a V flat to come back out to give a really large light source, really close. And it, just like any other photography, the larger, the softer, the closer, the better, right? So it's none of the if you learn aspects of other photography, it will apply to food. This is not,
which is my mantra. I mean,
it's not rocket science.
I keep trying to explain to people, stop trying to learn. In fact, don't try and learn, not just stop. Don't try and learn only from your genre of photographers, because the odds are they've experienced the same things as you, and you really need to learn from people. This is part of the reason I'm liking doing critique shows. Part of what you can learn, or a big part of what you can learn, is those people who have experienced different challenges than you, and then take those solutions and apply them. But how do you keep the glisten?
Okay, so what I will do is I will set up a shot, usually with, when I first approach it, as I set up the table, as I set up the scene, I'll start with a piece of cheesecloth on a plate. I don't even have the food yet. I'm creating my setup. I'm creating my scene, whatever props I'm going to use. I get my lighting pretty much down. I get my camera into where the position I want it. Tripod, definitely, after you get your shot, you can handhold, but I always start locked down. Then I will bring in the hero. And if it needs a little more oomph, for food, I will use oil, a little bit of oil on a food brush. I will bring in once in a while. I do have glycerin. I use that more for the beverage, believe it or not. But a little bit of oil brushed on if I really want to give it a little more pop. But a lot of times I try to do as little as I can to preserve the integrity of the dish. So if I'm shooting for a restaurant, I'd like to ensure that what the people are going to see is what they're going to get. Now, I will do things to try to raise the level, mostly from a styling perspective, but I try not to doctor the food much beyond a little water or a little oil.
What do you do with the glycerin? Do you spray it on a glass?
Yes. So beverage photography now is, to your point about lighting and the reflections, beverage can drive you insane. There's a lot of tricks to help to get control of that light. What I do there usually is my lights are in strip boxes, and then I'll put another level of diffusion material in front of it, either the Lee filters strips, big rolls, or in the past I've used even as tracing paper in the past, and large
just
sheets.
Something to cut down on the brightness to kill any speculars.
Yeah, another diffusion.
And then the glycerin's going to have a lower reflection rate than drops of water.
Okay, but the glycerin is to give the cold cues, to give that glass that look of condensation, right? To really cut down on the reflections and soften the reflections, I will use dulling spray, 3M Krylon dulling spray, on glass and on bottles. You got to be careful of the labels, but I will dull it. My bottle and glass prep usually starts the day before I shoot. So if I'm working for a client, I will say, what glasses do you want to use? Give me the bottles that we're going to shoot. I do work for a lot of breweries. Give me the bottles you want to shoot. Give me some heroes. And I start the day before with dulling spray. Does two things for me. It gives me a little more control over the light, takes out that little bit of that shine. And then it also gives me another layer of diffusion through the glass itself. So that when I'm coming, especially if I'm coming from behind a little bit, to get that glow of, the beer, to make it like that truly golden,
beverage, yeah.
Or give, whiskey, get that caramelly flavor.
Speaking my language.
So that will give me a little more diffusion of the light coming through the bottle and kind of spread it out there. Then the glycerin comes in when I really want to get that condensation look of a beer bottle just coming out of the cooler, 50-50 through a fine mist spray. And I will sit there and I will basically paint on to get the water droplets, to get that condensation droplets. So that's where the glycerin comes in, because the nice thing is once that you'll get a little bit of drip initially, but then that glycerin will kind of hold on and kind of freeze in place. And then you're able to really shoot that bottle or glass, how you want it.
All right. So So that was basically a beginner class in food and beverage photography. I love that, which brings us to today's shot. So if you are not watching this on video, if you're listening on audio, go by the website, behindtheshot.tv. Take a look at this photograph. If you're watching on video, it'll make more sense to you as I bring it up here. And I'm going to try and describe it. This is a round, apple tart. It looks like a tarte tartin. It looks like almost a pie or an apple pizza. And okay, here we go. This is the part of the show. I say it every time, but it's true. I'm never at a loss for words, but describing pictures is really difficult. So the picture, I want you to picture almost 16 by 9, but it's probably 4:3 ratio. The plate is a normal dinner plate size looking thing. I mean, it could be smaller, but the way it's cropped, it bleeds out the right-hand side, the top and the bottom, but it's sitting where the center of the pie is on the right rule of third. And so therefore the curvature of the left side of the plate almost hits the left rule of third. And then you have, I don't know what they're called. It's like a cake serving utensil, pie serving utensil. It's like a, silverware spatula type thing. Pulling out one piece, but here's what makes this shot to me. That spatula has a shadow under it on it's an old rustic wooden table. It makes it feel like this is mom's apple pie, right? And it even the silver spatula makes it feel like it's an old country silverware set for company. But the way it's propped up, it's lifting that piece that's being pulled out off the plate. And you can tell it adds depth to it without shadowing the rest of the pie. Even though the spatula has a shadow, it's not ruining the rest of the pie with a shadow. And again, what you want to see, there's crumbs underneath it. Now I automatically know that this is flaky, right? It's a really tight crop. It's just a beautiful image. What body was this shot with?
Actually, to the much to the chagrin of especially when I work for Canon, I still use a 5D Mark II.
Okay, so that's a 5D Mark II. What lens?
This guy was, believe it or not, my 24-70 on this one.
So I look up EXIF data on every shot if it's in there. And what I found on this shot was f11, ISO 500, 70 millimeters at 1/125th. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So I've got a lot of questions on that. And by the way, white balance is auto. I'm assuming you shoot raw, so it doesn't matter. You're going to set that in post.
Yeah, but my white balance, I locked down. So this was shot with the flashlight balance.
Okay. So like 5500.
Yeah.
Okay. Manual mode?
Yes.
So here's what struck me about the exposure on this that I thought was interesting. I get the 500, ISO 500. No matter what your light is, you are indoors. You want to capture some of that ambient. You don't want to have to use all the light to overpower it. You want a kiss of it. Otherwise, you're going to blow half the highlights on that crust, right? Mm-hmm. And the crust just looks amazing. The 70 millimeters I like because with the 24-70 at 70 millimeters, you are getting a little bit of compression bringing that table up towards the pie, right?
Yes.
F11 I totally get, right? You've got depth of field all the way through, which really would matter on this shot because I need to see the grain on that table come through. Mm-hmm. If the grain of the table was soft because the depth of field was too shallow, or for that matter, even the detail in the spatula, that would be a problem. But the 1/125th, was this on a tripod?
Yes and no. It was, I build for overhead shots. I've got a homemade do-it-yourself, basically 2 light stands with a crossbar, 2 knuckles on it, and I attach the tripod head to the knuckles of the crossbar so I can shoot straight down from just about any height.
And I should have mentioned that in my description. This is a straight top-down shot.
Right.
That's actually what makes it work. If this was from the side, you'd lose the power.
Right.
This has graphic design in it. Actually, we were talking about composition. Really, the strongest suit of this isn't the food; it's the composition that makes you feel like that food is in front of you, like you're going to lean down and smell it. To me, mm-hmm. But 1/25th, even with that, seems low.
Well, I've got to keep it. I do have to keep the sync speed of the lights in thought, right? Because this is got a flash. I flash this. So I'm trying to remember how I landed at 1/25th specifically. I usually keep it. I usually go in the 100ths. It might have just been that I think it might have been as simple as that's where I landed after my previous shot.
Which would make sense, right? But you understand what I'm saying. I mean, if this thing's locked down, okay, do 40th of a second, who cares? Except, you've got that thing balancing there. There's a lot of variables in this, and I would think at 200th of a second, you'd meet the sync speed. So, okay.
Right. My shutter, in something like this kind of shot, my shutter is almost irrelevant, to be honest with you. I'll really tune in where my aperture is going to be. And in this case,
is F11 pretty standard for you?
Will be, yeah. F11 is pretty standard. This room, so this was for the cookbook. the dining area and the bar. This was actually shot in the bar area of the restaurant, and it sucks up light. It's a very dark room. It's got the best way to describe it is think of old colonial pub. That's what the bar looks like. Okay.
Yeah, you could tell from that table. Yeah, that table's had a lot of beer slid across it.
Exactly. So it definitely kind of eats up some light. I also, what I did too, the reason why I came up with the 70 millimeter is to get that shadow under that spatula. I wasn't getting it how I wanted it at first. So that plate is actually raised up on another plate. And I wanted the 70.
Okay.
I wanted the 70 millimeter to compress and bring the table and the plate closer together.
Okay. That
and 100 gave me. I was too tight with 100. I usually live with 100 millimeter or an 85, but I wanted the compression, but it just gave me. It was too tight, and I didn't have the ability to keep going up with my rig. So that's how I got.
But how many times have you and I been asked, can you explain lens compression to me? And, you explain it and they kind of have a glassy look over their eyes as they say, yes, I get it, but they don't. And this is the perfect example of that. And that is, I'm going to try and describe it. If the plate was right on the table and the spatula lifting the piece of pie up on the plate, therefore having space to the table, you don't have enough distance on the shadow to get a nice, crisp, dark shadow. So you lift the plate up, give more distance between the spatula and the table. The problem there is, if you shot it wide, it's going to be obvious that the plate is not on the table. And by compressing it and bringing everything in, appearing closer together, I did not know that this plate was not level on the table. It looks completely natural.
Probably about maybe an inch and a half off the table.
Wow. Okay.
And again, back to rules of photography are universal, right? So, the compression, everybody thinks about compression in landscaping and landscape photography.
Or portraits.
Same principle applies.
Okay. So you go out on a job like this, I'm sure the instructions are much more than something that you can, list time-wise. But from that overhead point of view, what are the base instructions that a client gives you on a shot like this? Or do you just go, this is what I want to do and I'm doing it?
So the overall theme for the cookbook, was to convey the ambiance of the restaurant, but make the food still be the heroes, right? So, like I said, the restaurant has a lot of character. It's an old building. It's been a inn and or restaurant for probably 100 years, and we wanted to capture not only the food but the ambiance, the character, the restaurant as one of the characters of the story as well. So, and that's what I will try to do with a restaurant, with an owner, with a chef beforehand, is tell me about your space. And I'll go visit, of course, and have conversations with them and scout out the location. But it's really a matter of, what do you want to convey? How do you describe your restaurant in just a few words? When somebody asks you, hey, I've never been here, how would you describe it? And now my job, of course it is to make the food look good and appetizing. But it's also then to be able to translate that into the images. Now, each individual image by itself may not capture it completely, but I try to at least advance the story a little bit with each image. And, this one was the bar top. It's, old and worn and lacquered, just kind of because you knew if it wasn't lacquered enough, you're going to get splinters. The wood's so old, right? But just to capture that feeling of, you just had a meal and now here's dessert. And it's almost like, it could be grandma's house, too. But just to get a feel for what am I going to feel when I'm in that restaurant? And what story does the owner want to convey about their space?
Well, and it looks, again, for those of you on audio, I always think it works better if you see the picture, but it looks hot. It looks moist. It looks, the spatula that's sitting there, is it just balanced or do you have a weight on it?
It's not. It's no, neither. Actually, I have a little. There's actually a piece of wood underneath the spatula to hold it up.
To hold it up and keep it level.
Right.
Okay, I was
so
wondering about that.
like kind of right where the crests the spatula. If underneath it, there's a little support piece
Which
of
makes
wood.
sense now that I know the plate's not on the bar.
Right.
Because that was one of the things, was when you're thinking that this plate is on the bar, then it's, okay, how are you keeping that thing from tipping or turning? Because the bottom of those are not perfectly flat.
Right.
So let's talk composition, because I think that's where this shines, right? You went with this super tight crop. I actually love that it's not perfectly balanced either. Mm-hmm. So there's more white plate still visible in the upper right corner than in the lower right corner. So it's a little heavy to the bottom. It gives some weight to the picture, as it were. What made you, and you could have shot this where you could see the whole plate, but still the same layout, right? Just expand it top, bottom, and right. Mm-hmm. What makes you in your head go, I need this to be tight?
I did shoot it with the whole plate as part of it. So I did have at one point in one of the shots, I do have the whole plate, but this one I felt worked. Everybody knows what a plate is. Everybody knows it's completely round, and your mind is going to fill in that space. Your mind is going to, if you follow along, you're going to fill in the rest of the plate. So
it's like Peter Hurley's description of how he does headshots, where he cuts the top off. Everybody knows the head is there.
Exactly. So I wanted, especially when I decided that I wanted to have the piece coming off the dish and I wanted to have the spatula, I felt that the tightness on that. Now, yes, you're correct that it does kind of it definitely leans to the right. It definitely comes down to the bottom. But if that piece and the spatula are pretty much dissecting the image, dead center, and that's the hero. That's where I want your attention to be.
That slice that you want. So, but you included the spatula. You chose to do the cut and do the spatula in this. And of course, some food photos you'll see, there'll be a distant, loose pile of coffee beans or a coffee cup or, something in the distance. What makes you decide what tangential accessories are in a food shot?
Again, the story I'm trying to tell. In this case, I wasn't so much going for here's dessert and you're at the restaurant, you're having dessert. There's coffee, there's creamer, there's a spoon, there's sugar. I wanted to really make this, because it was a cookbook in this case, I wanted the Apple Tarte to really be front and center. I thought that anything else for this guy was going to just take away and distract. And I will, if I'm trying to convey, dessert or tea or even dinner as itself, I will definitely have props. I will definitely have dishes.
You could do, like a bowl of ice cream faded in the back depth of field was, right?
Exactly. And because I was coming straight down with this, and the wood had so much character to it, the wood is the prop. The wood is the other piece of the story. So
so lighting wise, how'd you light this?
Okay, so this was, like I said earlier, this is one Paul Buff, basically bouncing into a V flat that is back and to the right, up back and to the right. Okay, and then so that gives me
so to the back and to the right, so upper right corner 2 o'clock-ish of the pie.
Yeah, 1, 2
and you
o'clock.
Can see the highlight there. Where's the Paul Buff at?
The Paul Buff is right in front of the V flat. So the light is between,
right under it. Okay.
It's between the dish and the V flat, aiming back into the V flat. So the light's hitting it and coming back out and
that's
then
the only
washing
light?
Across. That's the only light. I do have a little bit of a bounce card. Probably about 8 o'clock, a white bounce card that I just have propped up just outside of frame to bring a little bit more of it back in.
Is that what's lighting that one center part of the bar, the wood?
Yes.
Or is that part of the bounce?
Over
Clearly
here,
the shadow is part of the bounce.
The shadow is part of the bounce. This around it is a little bit of is that bounce card.
Interesting. Okay, so you get this thing back. You sit at the computer to process a food shot. What's your basic process?
I will give it a little bit of contrast. I will give it a little bit of texture, either through clarity or now through the texture slider in.
See, this is actually, to me, this is a perfect example of where texture would be an advantage over clarity.
Yeah, I mean, this is a literally a touch of clarity, not much. Just I'm very hesitant to use clarity over a couple of points. I try not to lean on it too heavy. I can see when a lot of people do lean on it very heavy, especially in food. So I mean, just a touch.
You opened the can. I have to go in.
Okay.
A couple of points means what? I mean, to some people, a couple of points is 20.
No.
5, 10?
If that. If for clarity, maybe 5. Yeah, maybe like 5. Okay. Probably about the 5 or 6. Texture, I will ride that a little harder. Maybe get up to about 20 or so. But
because
yeah.
It's so subtle. But see, almost the like cinnamon look in the middle, I could see texture being just wonderful for that.
Yeah.
And the bar, for that matter. The texture would be killer on the bar without losing the wood grain to the weird contrast you get from too much clarity.
Right.
But,
and the raking light. Look, that most of that is in camera from that light raking across it. It's because I kept kind of pretty low. So it's that light is just glancing across it. It's not coming straight down on it. It's almost like you're feathering, right? So where you feather a portrait, I'm feathering that light across the top of the apple tart, just so it's just kind of bouncing across it and then coming back off.
So, okay, you bring this in post, you do all of that to it. And I'm not saying this happened to your shot. Okay, let's be really clear. But hypothetically, if you did all of that and you looked at it in post and went, there's just still not something popping, right? It doesn't look fresh and inviting like food should look. Mm-hmm. Is there one go-to trick that you use to add a little fresh look?
No, I would if I didn't get it in the shot, I would say it's dead. The shot's the picture's dead. Okay. There's not one go-to that I could say will bring back any specific shot. No.
Interesting. Okay. So people that want to, for their first time, try food photography, what should people know going in before they try it?
Don't kill yourself. Don't break the bank on lighting.
Tip number 1, don't die.
Don't kill yourself. Yeah. Good motto for everything, right? Don't break the bank on lighting. And don't assume you need to have a ton of lights. Definitely you need to learn lighting. You need to be able to, like I said, yes, sun is great, but you don't always have it. I did a shoot for a restaurant down on the beach, and I wanted light and airy and beautiful and just convey summer. They had a lot of open windows. I figured I'm not even going to bring the lights out of my bag. And within 10 minutes, a big cloud came over, and I had no window light whatsoever. Learn how to mimic. With one light, learn how to mimic the sun as best you can. And you don't need a lot. You can start with a Youngway, one of those $90 speed lights and build up from there. One light will get you most of the way there. Bounce cards, make yourself, I do more shopping now at craft stores than I do at photography stores. Between bounce cards, poster board, I use poster board is probably 70% of my lighting is off of poster boards taped together to create V's that I can put on tables, little pieces of cardboard, of black poster board to take light out sometimes, to pull light away from a spot where I don't want it. So for me, this image, I'll tell you the one thing that drives me bananas about it. See that light that's crossing over the spatula?
Yeah.
I should have fixed that. That drives me nuts.
I like that.
That one band of light right as the handle. That,
right, the bend in the handle.
Yeah, that I should have fixed. It's okay, but it's not gonna keep me up at night, and it's not gonna be a regret on my deathbed. But that is, I should have figured out with a black card where that was coming from exactly, and positioned a black card to take that out so it matched the rest of the handle. So learn how to use one light, learn how to do things to supplement that one light with bounce cards, with gobos, and begin to really play with just that simple setup. Beverage, whole different animal. I think you need to have more lights. You can do it with one, but then you got to do a lot in post.
So, okay. So then let's say same student, for lack of a better phrase, right?
Yeah.
That wants to try food photography. If there was one type of food that you would suggest, look, if you're going to experiment with this at home and you're going to try food photography for the first time, your first piece of food should be?
Try a muffin.
Like a blueberry muffin.
Blueberry muffin, corn muffin, and that trick, exercise, light an egg from all different perspectives.
Old photography school thing. Yeah.
Right. Do that with a muffin. Do that where you've got a muffin, light it one way, bounce, from the side, bounce some light in, different camera angles, play around with the muffin. You can spend all day shooting one muffin. Then, as you're shooting it, tear it apart, get the base, get the top, play around with a muffin for a day and try to light it different ways.
A muffin is basically the mannequin head of food photography. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's because it will give you it will give you texture. It can give you glisten across the top. A muffin will do a lot for you. Yeah. To learn.
All right. So last quick question before we close out. Mm-hmm. The name of one photographer people should look up.
Andrew Scrivani.
Andrew, what's the last name?
Scrivani.
Scrivani. He's going to read it off the book.
Exactly. Scrivani. His book is brand new. He shot for the New York Times. He still does. Did food photography. Has been doing food photography probably for 15, 20 years maybe. You can't go through more than 1 or 2 days of one of the New York Times cooking sections without finding one of his shots. Okay. Good pick.
Good pick. So Freddy Clark, and first of all, let me say, Rick Salmon, thank you so much for introducing us, man.
Thank you, Rick.
I appreciate it. Now we both owe him a beer, which is not going to be good. Freddie, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Steve, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, if you're watching the video of this show, I've had lower thirds pop up periodically as Freddie was talking. But Freddie, if people want to go to your website, what's the easiest link people can go to?
FreddyClark.photography. That's the easiest way. Yep.
Okay. And so no .com. It's FreddyClark.photography. That'll redirect you actually to the real site. And all your social media is what?
Is Sante Photo. SantePhoto. Sante is French for cheers. So, trying to go
ask that too.
Yeah. So going along with the beverage thing, especially, it's cheers photography, Sante Photo.
Well, Freddie, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really, really appreciate it. People go by the website, behindtheshot.tv, check out his gallery, check out a little blurb that I wrote about him, and all the links to everything you need, including the book, are up there.
Yep, the book is there. We've got some food workshops coming up in March, so all the info is going to be on the website.
And the Mount Rainier workshop
and
is
Mount Rainier
October, I think it is, of 2020. And all the info for that, correct me if I'm wrong, is on Rick Salmon's site.
Both. You can find it on Rick's site or on my site. Yeah, we've teamed up to do it. So both places will get you there and lead you to the Eventbrite page. There are still a couple spots open, and we are actually thinking about adding a second if the desire is there. So
okay, and I'm going. So I don't do landscape photography, so this will be a total crash and burn.
All right, great.
Hey, that's
and
okay.
There's a brewery right in the little town we're staying in. So
Perfect. So go look that one up either on Freddy's site, Freddy Clark, and it's Clark, Clark. There's no E at the end like some European countries do.
Correct.
It's Freddy, one D?
Two Ds. Freddy, Clark, Clark.
Okay. .photography, not .com.
Right.
So again, to Freddy Clark, thanks so much for coming on Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill. A couple things really quick to close with. Again, I want to hit, if you are a podcast listener or watcher, the show is available in both video and audio formats, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, assuming that wherever you get them supports video. Otherwise, there obviously is an audio version. But if your app or your service does support video, look up either one of those versions if you wish to watch the show. The video also available on YouTube. Over at Flickr, we've got the Behind the Shot group. Go join the group. You can have a free Flickr account or a pro Flickr account. Doesn't matter. Join the group, submit your images, and if you submit them with the Flickr tag, not the hashtag, the normal Flickr tag, BTS Critique, Don Komorechka and I are doing critique shows that are only up at the YouTube channel. And the way we're getting the images for the critique shows is we randomly select a couple of images from the Behind the Shot group on Flickr that are also tagged with BTS Critique. It has to be in the group and tagged, and we do that. And again, make sure you check out Don's podcast as well, Photo Geek Weekly. I'm lucky enough to be a guest on there periodically. That's it for this episode. This is Behind the Shot, the show where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by taking a closer look behind one of their shots from conception to completion and all the stories and challenges that happen in between. I'm Steve Brazill, and we'll see you on the next show.